I think I can speak for most of us when I say that one of the more commendable things MiHoYo does for its games is that it keeps, or at least tries to keep, older units viable in perpetuity or for as long as they can. I haven't played Honkai 3rd, but at least in Genshin, there are several day 1 units that remain competitive in the meta even today, whether they've been that way since the beginning or if they got retroactively buffed, like how Jin got Farina or Kotin got Dendro. Either way, though Star Rail is only about 8 months old, the same is mostly happening here too. I'd wager the game's power scaling is advancing a bit faster than Genshin, but for the most part, any character that was good in version 1 like Bronya, Tingyun, Sela, Gepard and such have stayed relevant. Unfortunately, it also means units that haven't had a good start don't really have much opportunity to find a second win, which is where we find Himeko. Though she is a rather popular character in terms of appeal, in-game, Himeko has never really been seen as a worthwhile unit to invest in beyond a surface level, and with their own internal limitations as well as her type of playstyle, there hasn't been any serious incentive for players to prioritize her over the game's existing lineup of units. Although with 1.6 now in the picture, that might be exactly what she, and by extension Erudition, needs to break through and obtain the spotlight. We'll be going through all of that in today's episode of Why No One Plays, featuring Himeko. As the de facto leader of the Nameless, a faction that adheres to the path of the Trailblaze, from a narrative perspective, Himeko carries a fair bit of influence and power. Early on in the game, we get to witness her authority firsthand through the general presence from her demeanor and status. Alongside Whelped, she takes the role of a surrogate guardian for the younger members of the Astral Express crew, March, Danheng, and us, the Trailblazer. In fact, if not for her, all of them will likely have perished on Eureka 6. I mean, for crying out loud, she controls a massive burning satellite laser beam and has arguably one of the most disrespectful ultimate cutscene animations in the game, so you know she's powerful. That was the impression I had of Honkai Star Rail's Himeko, and she was the first 5-star unit I pulled in the game, so I was feeling pretty good about her. As you know though, narrative strength doesn't always correlate to practical strength. The HSR community wasted no time theory crafting some semblance of an early metagame, and when everything settled, Himeko was given a fairly modest rating of being a serviceable unit. Not a bad one, but not a good one either. But as the game progressed through each version and more units were added, in addition to more and more players reaching Star Rail's current endgame, reasons to use Himeko have been diminishing, causing players to view her as one of the worst 5-star units in the game. To better understand how this happened, let's briefly highlight her abilities. In the realm of Erudition, Himeko is extremely faithful to her path of choice, for better or worse. Her skill is a blast attack, damaging a single target followed by collateral damage to adjacent enemies. When combined with the first two major traces, Starfire and Magma, she has a chance to apply burn damage over time, which in turn raises the damage of her skill by 20%, a rather unusual property for an Erudition character. Ordinarily, damage over time is associated with the Nihility path, evidenced by Kafka, Luca, and Sample's gameplay revolving around it, so being an Erudition unit who can apply burn damage is not something you would expect to see. In any case, let's continue to her ultimate, firing a massive laser beam from outer space that literally nukes the entire field. Unlike most other screen nukes though, Himeko's ultimate has a refresh mechanic attached to it, regenerating 5 energy for each enemy struck. This means that if she can clear a full wave of mobs, she can spam her ultimate very often when combining the self-energy refresh with the energy you normally get from taking down enemies. Onto her talent, anytime an enemy target gets hit by weakness break, whether by her or someone else in her party, she gains a stack up to 3. When fully stacked, she deals follow-up fire damage to all enemies. What's notable about this ability is that it triggers even if the original target dies. For instance, if you use Himeko's ultimate to blast through the first wave of enemies, then her talent activates on the second wave if she broke at least 3 enemies from the first. That's how she got her status as the ultimate Calyx farmer. She could insta-clear the wave with her ultimate, and then insta-clear the wave that came after with her follow-up attack, then insta-clear the wave that came after using her refreshed ultimate, and just repeat the cycle over and over again. This was especially quick when used in conjunction with Herta, whose follow-up attack in tandem with Himeko's for chain clearing. That comprises Himeko's gameplay. She's all about dealing with waves of enemies, as expected of an Erudition character. So long as she continuously breaks toughness gauges and or kills enemies with her ultimate, she arguably has the best clear speed out of any unit in the game, even more than other Erudition units like Jingyuan and maybe Argenti, assuming the fight consists of nothing but easily killable waves of monsters. And that's where we arrive at the first major issue impacting her gameplay. As highlighted in my video on destruction units, between versions 1.0 to 1.5, most of the game's relevant content, and I emphasize relevant, consisted of a single enemy or small groups of enemies. Even against groups of 5 like in Swarm Disaster, when those propagation beetles multiplied, destruction was more than sufficient at clearing them, since if you clear enemies in the center, outer positioned enemies automatically reposition to be close together. This effectively meant that destruction units were almost always a better choice over Erudition, as while they don't possess as much wave clear as an Erudition unit, they have enough to get the job done, while dealing measurably higher damage against single targets. Like I said before, among the 5-star Erudition units, Himeko is the most faithful to what an Erudition unit is, wave clearing. She trades almost all semblance of single target DPS in exchange for fast and efficient damage to multiple waves of enemies. though this does make her one of the best auto battle farming units for quick and easy content like Golden Galaxies. Against anything that can't be one-shotted, specifically isolated enemies, her damage falls off a cliff, and up until version 1.6, that was basically everything in the game. The bulk of Himeko's DPS hinges on two things: enemies dying and or breaking quickly and in large quantities. Heavenly Flare is subjectively a very weak ultimate, only capping out at 230% at rank 10 compared to units like Lunai Danheng and Jinliu whose ultimates deal 300%, or Seela who can do over 4, not even counting their ability to amplify their ultimate's damage beyond that. The only virtue Himeko's ultimate has is that it basically has the Auspicious Star Blessing built into it, letting you potentially spam it more often than other ultimates so long as you're killing stuff. Meaning, if you're not sweeping the waves of enemies, this is one of, if not the lowest damaging ultimates in the game point for point. Victory Rush also has the potential to deal a ton of damage. If you're continuously breaking enemy toughness gauges, this thing can proc multiple times over the course of a fight, as the only requisite for activating it is to either break 3 normal enemy gauges or 1 elite/boss enemy gauge. Neither of these factors are exactly within the player's control. If you miscalculate how much damage you need for Himeko's ultimate to deal the finishing blow on a slightly more durable enemy, you miss out on that energy regeneration, and if you accidentally kill targets without breaking their toughness meters, you miss out on charge points for her talent. Himeko can only perform well if everything goes perfectly, and the only way everything goes perfectly at the moment is against waves of enemies that she can realistically one-shot without even trying. Against bosses or anything that can remotely tank hits, her damage drastically falls off. In contrast to someone like Jingyuan, whose Lightning Lord will always activate in a set interval, Himeko can struggle with consistency. While there is the possibility that she can attack more frequently than Jingyuan, Himeko can also attack less frequently than Jingyuan. Not to mention, Jingyuan's Lightning Lord can deal significantly more damage. Empirically, this has given Himeko a really bad first impression. In the early to mid-game, players understandably don't have the means or wherewithal to deck her out with good equipment. She doesn't have access to good weapons or relics yet, and without her traces, both major and minor, she struggles to do any meaningful damage. As a result, she can have a rather tough early game before she can reach maximum performance. The thing is, when she does reach endgame, she gets outscaled by many other units with higher ceilings than her. During the endgame, players are long past the need to grind Calyxes and are more focused on content like Memory of Chaos or Sworn Disaster, whose enemies are far too bulky to be swept by Himeko. They sort of accounted for this by making it so her talent gets full stacks if her team weakness breaks an elite enemy or boss, so she can still activate it somewhat consistently over the course of a boss fight, as opposed to Herta, who literally can only activate her talent once per boss fight and no more than that. But realistically, you can only apply weakness breaks so many times against a single target. Ideally, Himeko wants a situation where there are multiple enemies and preferably in a pattern that can be broken. For instance, having 1 elite enemy and 3 normal ones, or 2 elite enemies and 1 normal one. How often can you run into these exact scenarios? You can't rely on that to be consistent. Moreover, though Himeko's talent charges up regardless of who does the breaking, the best way she can use her talent is if she's the one doing the breaking, because if hypothetically her Victory Rush activates and breaks 3 enemies, it can re-trigger itself. The problem is that for this to happen, all of her enemies need to have fire weakness, which obviously won't always be the case. What makes Silverwolf such a boss killer is that, among other things, she can apply elemental weaknesses to bosses corresponding to her carry's element if said boss doesn't already have it. Silverwolf can only do that to one target at a time. She can't give fire weakness to entire waves of enemies all in one go, making her somewhat incompatible with Himeko, who wants to constantly be killing things. It's not even just her own abilities either. Her personal light cone's also fashioned exclusively in this way. For every enemy on field, she gains bonus attack, incentivizing her to always be fighting 5 dudes at all times, and whenever an enemy gets broken, she gets a huge amount of bonus damage, but only for 1 turn, requiring her to continuously break enemies to maintain that damage. Most of the time, it's basically impossible to reach the full strength of a light cone, as there would almost never be an instance where you're always fighting 5 enemies and always breaking. That's ultimately the central problem affecting her and why people think she feels bad to use. Her entire gameplay, everything about her, from her ultimate to her talent to her own personal weapon, is circumstantial and therefore inconsistent. It's not necessarily that a kit is badly designed or has any major deficiencies. All things considered, it is a well-designed moveset. It's just really situational, and so far there haven't been many situations, if any at all, that cater towards Himeko's niche. The other 2 5-star Erudition units, Jingyuan and Argenti, have aspects of their kit that allow them to still be useful against a lower quantity of enemies. Jingyuan's Lightning Lord can attack up to 10 times, with every hit consisting of a random blast attack that damages the primary enemy while splashing onto adjacent ones. This works best against clusters of enemies, as the blast nature of Prana Extirpated means it can damage up to 30 enemies. But if there's only 1 enemy, that means all 10 attacks will strike that 1 enemy for 660% of his attack. So on one hand, you miss out on the 500% collateral damage, but on the other, it ensures a guaranteed 660 on a single target. Even then, however, Jingyuan is pretty suboptimal against bosses compared to other units. Same goes for Argenti. Argenti's level 2 ultimate damages all enemies for 280 at rank 10 and then attacks another 6 more times at random for 95 for an extra 570%. Expectedly, you want there to be 5 dudes so we can lay that 280 damage on everyone, but at the same time, if you're attacking only one person, it guarantees that all 6 of those extra hits will land on that one enemy, ensuring more concentrated damage. So while he still gets outperformed by Jingliu or Lunai Danheng, Argenti also has a contingency built in place so that against a single target, his DPS doesn't fall off a cliff. Himeko unfortunately doesn't have that built-in contingency. I mean, technically she does if you count the full stacking from elite mobs, but the bottom line is she's not known for damage, she's known for clearing. There's a big difference. The sad part is that Himeko has a ton of ways to amplify her DPS that other units don't have. For one, Asta's Ignite Trace gives 18% bonus fire damage to all enemies. To my knowledge, she's one of the few supports in the game right now that increases damage for a specific element. 2. Topaz. Topaz grants a whopping 50% bonus to follow-up attacks, and since Himeko's Victory Rush counts as follow-up attack damage, that's another way she can boost herself up. But those privileges are lost on her because she's not built to be a carry. You could play Himeko as a hyper carry unit, but the foundation is just not there. She doesn't really have that same vertical investment potential that someone like Argenti does. Overall, Himeko is a victim of poor circumstance. People think she's bad for mostly the wrong reasons. Yes, she's weak, but that's only due to her being a square peg in a round hole. People are trying to evaluate her the same way they evaluate Seele, Danheng, Jingliu, and such. By extension, that's the whole issue with Erudition right now. There's just not a suitable form of combat for them. Or rather, there wasn't a suitable form of combat. Now there is. Accompanying version 1.6 is Pure Fiction, a new endgame mode consisting of a series of highly difficult stages where enemies continuously appear. By taking one down, you earn points, and they endlessly spawn. The more points you accumulate, the better. This changes everything. To repeat, Himeko's specialty is clearing, not bossing. Pure Fiction is all about clearing. Clear as many enemies as you can within a set number of turns. Given ultimates and talent activations do not count as turns, Himeko is the perfect choice for Pure Fiction. If you can sufficiently gear her up to where she can reliably chain her ultimate and talents, Himeko will be an extremely powerful asset for this type of content. Currently, the best form of content for her are Calyxes due to being able to fight multiple waves at once and each wave consisting of a lot of easily one-shottable enemies. Pure Fiction is essentially an endgame Calyx, so anyone who can passively hit a bunch of enemies at once like Himeko, Argenti, and possibly even Herta will have a natural advantage in this department. Once more, Himeko has the potential to deal a lot of damage if the situation allows for it. It's just that up until 1.6, there hasn't been a situation appropriate for her, but now there is, which is why I wanted to make a why no one plays on her. Next to Yanqing, Himeko had to have been the unluckiest 5-star unit in the game. She belongs to the path of Erudition, notorious for being the worst of the 3 DPS paths in light of their virtue, AoE clearing not being of high priority. Then, she's fully geared towards dealing damage against waves of enemies, of which the only place that happens is the one place everyone auto-farms anyway. So for the most part, there was practically zero reason for people to use her as the main damage dealer, instead choosing to use her for supporting fire thanks to her passive talent applying burn damage over time and her talent's follow-up. However, with Pure Fiction, I can veritably see people looking to dust her off, buffing her with all the support they can, and making her go to town on everyone with a pizza cutter. So there is hope for the coffee addict. Time will tell. Anyways, that concludes my Why No One Plays episode for Himeko. I'm genuinely hoping this video will age poorly because I'm a huge fan of her character and was really sad to have to bench her. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on Himeko, if you agree or disagree with my points. As always though, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my Why No One Plays Herta video if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.